So we're going to start to take a look at the graphical capabilities of a Niagara 4 station, whether this is running on a web supervisor or on a controller like a Jace. But there are a couple of important things to understand first of all. So your graphics are more than likely going to include some images at some point. It could be a company logo or a floor plan or a pretty backdrop template. And to do that, we need to go and locate those images and bring them into the file structure of the station. Whether that is on a PC or a controller, it doesn't matter. It needs to live in this particular location. So I'm just going to go and find some images. So from my user home, Niagara 4 TCP resources is an image folder. And within here, there's a couple of images, a picture of a house and a Tridium logo. And I'm just going to copy that folder. So the images can be standard web compliant images of JPEG, PNG, GIF and SVG. And I'm just going to paste that entire folder into my station for use later on. So we're going to create several different graphical views across the next few labs. And when we create a graphical view, it will create something that we call a PX file that will live in the file structure. Now we often see that engineers who've been trained in different brands other than Tridium tends to be shown how to do this in a very specific way, in that they'll just dive straight into the file structure, create a PX folder, and then right click and create a new PX file, which is the graphics file, and then they'll just start engineering the PX file and off they go. It is possible to do the engineering in that particular way, but there are a couple of problems with doing it that way. One is that certain things just will not work in the PX file directly, which we'll see later on. And there is later also a bit of a security implication that you are actually in the file space of the station and not technically inside the station space. So whenever we create a graphical view, the process should always be to select the space where you want the graphic. It could be a folder or a subfolder, but we're going to right click, go to views and select the new view option. So we could do that on a point if we wanted to. Everything has this option, and it could even be within a network and on a device. So the new view option. The folder has also the new view option. So we're going to take a look at this process of creating a view next and how we bring items in. But the most important thing to remember is every graphical page should always have a view associated with it inside the station. So I'm currently navigating within my config drivers, Modbus network, main plant device, the plant room, and I'm on the wire sheet. So within here, there's also a boiler control folder. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on that folder, go to views and create a new view. So then we'll get this pop-up up asking us to select a few different things. So the first one is the view name. I'm going to call it boilers. Now the view name is now creating a PX file called boilers.px. The view name and the PX file name do not have to be the same. We can make them different things, but automatically it will take the view name and create a PX file. If you've got a more complicated station going on, you might not want to just create all the PX files at one level. You might want to put them into subfolders, which we can do, and we'll demonstrate that in a minute. But I also want to then create a target media type. So there are several options in here. Some of them are very legacy. So Workbench PX Media is a Java view, which was really a hangover from the AX days. We can still access that in a particular way, but it's not really of interest in terms of a web browser because we can't view it as Java is not allowed in a web page. There's a HX PX Media, which was historically the HTML4 secondary option in Niagara AX. In earlier versions of Niagara 4, that became the HTML5 view. But today we really want to be selecting this UX media view, as it's got a bit more compression going on, the pages will load a bit faster. So I'm going to press OK there. And I get this grid type view going on. I'm just going to double click on the background and set a background color. And I'm going to come back and look at that in a lot more detail in a minute. When I go to a different location now, so I'm just going to go to a plant room, I'll get the point manager view. I'm going to go back to boiler control and double click. And now the default view is the graphic that I created, so boilers. The other views are still available, but I have to select them. So if I go into the AX property sheet for a second, and I go down to the bottom, the boiler PX view is a slot that's available, and it gives me some information. So it tells me that the media is a UX media, and it's linked to this file in the file space. So I'm just going to go to Files, into the PX folder, and there's the boilers.px file. I can double click on that, and I can go into edit mode and start doing things with it, but it's very important to understand that right now I'm in the station, files, PX folder, and in the raw PX file. I'm going to open up a second tab and just go back to my station view. So within my station, I'm in config, drivers, the network, the device, and eventually the folder where the view is. So although these two right now look exactly the same in terms of what's in the page, there is a very fundamental difference between how a user would access them. So in this example here, the user account will be accessing the station space and be fully captured by the station security. Whereas in this example, they would be in the file space, and it does depend on how the security is set up. But as I previously explained, certain things just don't work in this type of view, and there's a security implication. So an engineer who knows Niagara well could potentially start to manipulate the path that they're in and start looking at files or going to places they're not meant to go to. So we're going to start to look at how to build this page up. The last thing I'm going to mention is that it is possible that a folder or a device can have multiple graphics available. So I'm just going to go new view again, and I'm going to call it boilers_new. I'm just going to change the background color of this one to be a different color. And again, press save. I'm just going to come out of edit mode. So double click. The default view is boilers because it was the first one that was created. But there is a second graphic that's available called boiler new. So you can stack your graphics on a single location, or it may be preferable that you create a folder structure to contain your graphics because it's more logical on how to navigate it. But we're going to start to take a look at how to build this page up and do things with it in a second. So I've navigated to the view inside my station. I'm here at this boiler control position, and I can see that by the address bar. And I want to start to edit the graphic, so I can either press this pen and paper icon on the top bar to enable edit mode, or I can change the view to the edit boilers view. So I'm just going to press the pen and paper. And I'm going to just stretch these windows out a little bit to give myself more space. And in the middle we've got the graphic, and it's very, what you see is what you get on the screen, so it's very representative of what's going to happen when we've finished. And the grid is indicating the available graphics space, and we'll take a look at that in a second. Over on the right hand side I've got a couple of windows available, the bound odds. So the bound odds will tell me about live data points from a station that are added to the graphic. There aren't any there right at this second in time. I've got a widget tree. Right now there's a scroll pane and a canvas pane. So whenever we add an item to the graphic, whether it's a label with a piece of text in it or an animated image that will spin round when it's active, they'll become what we call a widget in the canvas list. And we can use this list to navigate between the items. Every items we add to the page will have some properties available. and we can create layers to group things together. And then the items, if we select them, in this case the background, if we double click, we'll get the property window up. But those same properties are available in the bottom right hand corner. So this view is very standard. We have some functional items along the top, so cut, copy and paste work exactly the same as with any item in Niagara. So we can select a label, copy and paste it, and then manipulate it in some way. We have some alignment icons, so if we multi-select labels, we can align them to the left or to the top. There's a zoom and zoom out functions, and then we've got some other options here about adding polygons or lines, which we'll get to looking at. So we're going to start to take a look at how to use this graphical page to create a view. Before you start making a graphic, there are some design considerations you want to make. It's a bit less critical today than it used to be, but the primary consideration is really what users are going to be viewing these graphics and what display are they going to be using. So most PCs today have a very large resolution available in that they tend to be at least HDMI at 1920 by 1080. So when we talk about that, we're talking about 1920 pixels wide by 1080 pixels tall. Now, Niagara graphics these days are pretty comprehensive in that they support this function called scalability. And that means that if you view the graphics on one laptop with a small screen, the graphics will fit. And then if you come on with a different type of display, that's maybe like a 4K monitor, the graphics will dynamically resize to fit the target screen that's being used. But there are still some very careful considerations you have to make about how you set that up. So if I double click on the background, the first thing is that this background has a scale option and it's set to fit ratio. There are some other options in there, but fit ratio means that it will respect the aspect ratio of the canvas size. So in this instance, it's 1000 by 800. And that's still important because that's like the shape of a graphic you're building. Now, most displays tend to be more of a rectangular shape today than a square type shape. So we maybe want to resize this canvas to be a bit more rectangular. And the reason that this is important is because in the old days, when we used to build graphics, you'd buy a PC and it would come with a monitor, and that monitor would have a fixed resolution. It maybe was 1024 by 768, or if you were really unlucky, it would be 800 by 600. So that's 800 pixels wide by 600 pixels tall. And we would have to build the graphics to correctly fit that screen. And the problem was that if we built the graphics on a bigger screen and then took it to site and it had a smaller screen, the graphics just wouldn't fit and you'd end up with scroll bars all over the place and it would look pretty horrific. Like I said, the scalability in the Niagara 4 graphics does overcome most of those problems, but we still want to consider some design criteria about the shape of the screen. So I'm going to set mine to be 1600 wide by 1000 tall. So remember, most screens are probably 1920 by 1080. That's all the space that's available. But when you're viewing a screen in a web browser, you probably got the same width, but you are going to lose some height. So we'll go with 1920 by 1080 for now. And that has become more of a rectangular shape. So I'm just going to come out of edit mode. It's not really obvious what's going on. But the idea is that as I stretch the window out, it will grow to fit the screen because it's scaling up and scaling down. You may want to experiment with this a little bit before you really get started on your graphics. To make things a bit smaller and easier to see, I'm going to set mine to 1600 by 900. Okay, so that's rectangular shape is what I've got to work with, and it will stretch itself out. Your other options though are you can fit the ratio, so maintaining that ratio that we've got there of 1600 by 900, or we can just make it fit the screen, fit the width, fit the height, and some zoom options. You will want to play around with those options to understand how it works, and then you've got these scaling factors that are available, because it will do what it wants to do based on those numbers that you put in. So we're now going to start to take a look at how we bring items into the. So I'm going to right click on the canvas and we get a new option. There's a couple of very basic options here, a label and a picture. I'm going to select the label. Now as I've added a label, it's appeared in the widget tree. There's no bound odds because it's not linked to anything yet, and all the properties are down here. But I'm just going to double click. I'm going to put in some text. Hello there. We've got lots of options available. So we've got the font size, and there's lots of fonts listed here. But you do want to be very careful about the type of font that you pick, because there are what we consider to be web safe fonts. So that's like your Arial, your sans serif, and several others. But these fonts are ultimately coming from my machine. And if I pick a very obscure font and it's not available on the machine that's viewing the graphics in the web browser, then it will get substituted for probably Times New Roman, and the graphics might not look how you expected them to look. So again, you will want to look at your graphics in the web browser later on and fully understand they are exactly how you built them. So I'm just going to change the size up. You can do bold and italics and all those styling things. The foreground colour, I can change that colour to whatever I like. And then I'm just going to stretch that out to fit. So I'm going to make it a bit bigger again because it's still a bit small. I'll go with 40. There's alignment options for H align and V align. All the things you'd expect from an editor. I'm just going to position that. So it's very, like I said, what you see is what you get. I can just click on that and drag and move it around. I can do what we call a rubber band by clicking and dragging over several items at once. I can use my arrow keys on my keyboard to nudge this around. So just that'll move it by 5 pixels at a time. A control and shift will move it by 1 pixel at a time. And then I can right click, cut, copy, duplicate, and so on. Well, that right now is just a fixed piece of text. Doesn't do anything else. That's all it's going to do. So I'm going to want to start to bring in some live data points, and we're going to take a look at how we do that now. So the workflow process is going to be very much the same across all of the graphics, in that we have to select a piece of information we want, bring it to the graphic, and then decide how it's going to be represented on the page. It could be a label, it could be a graphical animated item that changes colour, a graphical image that spins around when it's on and stops when it's not, or it could be a chart or a gauge or dozens of different options. The workflow process is to select the information we want, drag it to the graphic and let go. And then we get this view called the Make Widget Wizard appearing. This will help us to select how we're going to present the piece of information. So at the top here, we can see the ORD, or the object resolution descriptor of the thing we want to bring in. I can double click on that white line and go and see where that point is inside the station and potentially change it. We've got a format text option of %.%. So what this is going to do, it's going to go and read a piece of information from this target, and then the text field here is yellow, indicating it's going to be animated, so it's going to show us some information. Then you've got lots of properties about how to present it, so the font and the styling. I'm just going to change the font size so we can see what's happening when it comes in. I'm going to go with 30. Not going to change anything else right now, and I'm just going to go OK. So right now it's brought a point in, I'm just stretching it out. It's got a value, and then it's got this brackets and status information going on. So every component tends to have two parts to it. It tends to have the value and the status. And when we're doing the graphics, we want to carefully select what we bring in, because it might get very busy and it might look very ugly, and we don't necessarily want the operator to see this stuff at the end. So I'm just going to drag that in again. And now double click on the line here, and I'm just going to go and look at it. So my boiler flow temperature has an out slot, and that out slot has two parts to it, a status and a value. Now I could specifically select the value, but that tends to be a lot of work, so I'm just going to select the parent point. But when I bring the component in, I can manipulate which part of it I want to use. So I could take out.value as a component, so I've got %out.value. If I wanted the status, it would be out.status. We're going to go with value for a second. And again, I'm just going to change the font size to make it a little bit bigger. And then we'll play with some of these settings a bit more in a minute. So now I've just got the value of a point, none of this status information going on. So it's a bit more useful. And whenever I bring the next component in, the Make Widget Wizard will remember my previous settings. It will default the font, so I may have to go and change the font every time to what I want. And then I can start to bring them in. But doing the points one by one may be a little bit of a slow process. So we'll look at how we can start to speed this process up. Just get rid of them off the page. And I'm going to select these binary points, drag them in one go. Bound label, previous choice selected, out.value. I'm going to change the font. So again, change the size of the font. And I'm going to make the alignment to the left. And I'm going to go OK. So those items will come in, and there they are. Just going to experiment with a few of the options. So I'm going to multi-select these temperatures, drag them in. And this time, I'm going to select Make the Display Name the Label. I'm going to go and change the font again, just so as we can see the information. So now I've got the value and a label over here on this side. However, the font size there is a little bit small. So again, I'm just going to update that to be 20. And then I need to stretch it out because it's all a bit cramped up. And there they are. So we get the label of the point and the value in one go. I personally don't particularly like the Make the Display Name the Label option. So we're going to look at some other options. I'm going to drag this in again. I'm going to untick that option. I'm going to, again, change the font to be a bit bigger. This time I'm going to select a border option to put it in a box. Got lots of options here, solid, outset, inset, and so on. We'll experiment with lots of these as we go along. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the status option, and the default option is color and blink. So I'm going to press OK. And by selecting that status option, it goes and looks at the status field of a point and shows you what's going on. So when we're in Point Manager and we see orange for fault, red for alarm, and purple for override, and so on, those status colorings can be brought straight into the graphic. So I've got my points there. I'm going to drag these in again now. And this time, rather than using the value, I'm going to go with the display name. So the same way we can do with histories and alarms, these properties we can get at and bring them into the graphic. So I'm going to set a font. I'm going to put it in a border, but of a different kind. I'll use an inset border. H align is going to be to the left. And my background colour, I might make a grey colour. So quite a few properties edited in one go. Status colouring, I'm not interested in this time. Just going to go OK. So we get the label and the point. Now the benefit of using the display name is that if I now start to go and change this, so I'm going to demonstrate it in two ways. I'm going to go right click and rename, and I'm just going to change the raw name of the point. Okay, so boiler flow temp, and I'm just going to do a refresh. Now because I've changed that odd, the point has disappeared from the graphic because it can no longer work out how to get it. So this display name becomes really important because the real name of the point will not change. It's just a display component that we're manipulating, which means that my graphic will carry on working regardless. You just have to be really careful, because if you do a project, then you're asked to go in and change some names, and you start renaming them all, you're potentially going to start to break the graphics and only realise later on. So I'm just going to change the name of this one back to the way it was, so my graphic carries on working. When I bring these temperatures in again, there is this hyperlink property that I can select, and it will populate the hyperlink field. So what I want to do is to go and view the history. So the hyperlink property is already linked to the point, and I could go and select the history org chooser and go and pick the direct history point. But if this point already has a history extension on it, I can just change the view to be the chart view, and then when I come out of edit mode, click on that point, it will jump me to the chart view. Now I don't particularly like that because it's bad user interface design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of the existing points, and I'm going to come up to the top, and we can start to add more functionality to a widget that's inside the station view. So there's lots of options in here. We're not going to run through them all now, but one of them is called the Kit PX pop-up binding. So it allows me to add a pop-up extension to the component. And this has an ORD on it itself. So again, I could go and choose a history, or I could link it back to the same point and select the chart view. So this is doing history, the station, the point name. Give it a title, history. Okay, so again, I'm going to come out of edit mode. So by coming out of edit mode, it will automatically do a save. And then I click on that component, and it will load the chart, but it's in a pop-up window, and in the background I still have a graphic that I was working on. So I probably prefer that rather than the hyperlink option. Again, it's a lot of experimentation to understand all of these features, which we're slowly starting. Jump back into edit mode, and Niagara is all about how can I do things in the fastest way possible with the least amount of work. So I'm going to delete everything I've done so far. I'm going to select the points I'm interested in all in one go from a nav tree. Click and drag, bound label, out value. I'm going to give them a border. I can change the colour if I wanted to. I'm going to change the font to be 20. The H line, I'm going to make it to the left, and I'm going to use the status colouring and no hyperlink. I'm going to go OK. So they're all there now. They're very close to the edge of the box, so the items all have this padding property, and the padding property, I'm going to move the text in from the edge basically, so it's not so close. I'm going to do that exact same thing again with the display name. Select a border, and then a font size. Do all your setup that you want, a background colour and so on. The H align to the left, the padding, all in one go. And then when you've got it how you want, you press OK, it comes in. Just going to stretch that out, and then move it around. Now, if these were all over the place in different different orientations, we can select them all, click and drag, and then from the top bar we can select this align to the left option and it will align them up, and then I can either click and drag around them again or use my keyboard to move them around. So we can bring the points in one go. It doesn't have to be on a one-by-one basis, but you do want to make sure you've made all your choices in one go, because if we now have to go in and start making changes to them one by one, that's where we start to burn up a lot of time. I want to bring in some animated graphics at this point. So I'm going to grab my boiler point, drag and drop again. And I'm going to make a different choice this time. So I'm going to go from palette, and I'm going to go and open up a palette. And there are several graphical libraries you're provided for free out of the box. So we've got KitPX Graphics, HVAC, Niagara 4 SVG. So I'm going to take this Niagara 4 SVG one. Lots of folders in here, so you've got to kind of understand what you're looking for, but I'm looking for a boiler. And then there are a couple of options. The magnifying glass icon will give you a preview of what it looks like, so you can pick an appropriate style of image. I'm going to pick that one and go OK. So now, if I was to right click and override that point on, the graphic is an animated item where it will show you exactly what's happening with that particular component. So the graphic should change value to represent what's going on. And again, it's about how can we do that in a more time efficient manner. So if I select both my boilers, drag them in, select the specific image that I want and press OK, it will bring them in together in one go, and I can move them around. I'm going to double click. So this component has an ORD. So the ORD is the path inside the station. And then the image field is animated. So this is a binary component, true and false. Takes the true value, swaps it out for one picture. Takes the false value, swaps it out for a different picture. So it's not very clever in any way. It's just taking the value and swapping it for a picture. Equally, if I bring the first one in, I could duplicate it, move it around, double click, select the ORD, press open, then go and pick the next point that I want to use, and it will just relink the ORD up to that particular point. So there are different ways of bringing them in. One is faster than. I'm looking at palette, KitPX N4 SVG. Again, there are lots of folders available. Again, the magnifying glass helps you to understand what you're looking at. But once you've done this enough times, you kind of know what you want. And up to now, I've been selecting the point, dragging it onto the view, and it appears. Now, some of the items in this palette are static images. So as an example, if we go into piping, large pipes, hot water system, supply, just drag one of those in. It's a static image and it just appears on the graphic. If we drag a bigger one in, there it is. Other items in this palette are an animated function. So boiler right here, I'm going to drag it in and it appears as an invisible square. It's not doing anything. So if I double click on it, it's got an ORD field that's null. And the image is an animated property where it needs a true or a false, and it doesn't have that right now. So I could drag that in from a palette and then go and manually select component chooser, click all the way down into my station, go and find the point that I want, but that's a lot of clicks. Alternatively, I could right click on the point here and go copy, double click on the invisible graphic, select the ORD field, do a paste with Control and V, and then it will link up to a point. But if we drag the point in, first of all, make the choice from the Make Widget Wizard, it kind of does it all for us in one go. Okay, so I can multi-select these by holding down Control and clicking on them. move them around together. Like I said, this kit PX part has a lot of graphical items in. The piping in particular, I'm just going to put a couple of them in. I'm not going to do them all. So I'm going to drag and drop that one on, position it where I want it. Control and D will allow me to duplicate that piece of pipe and move it down. So that's a supply pipe. It's very red. There is an equally a return one that's a slightly different colour. So it's trying to show you that one's supply and one's return. It's a very subtle difference. And then there's all sorts of piping components that are available within here. So if we just go into the preview mode, you can click on one, press the down arrow, and go and find whatever you're after to build up your pipes. They're just a static item. They don't really do anything else. I'm not going to do more than that in terms of piping. This is really a very basic introductory to the graphics. Like I said, when I come out of edit mode and I start to make it bigger, it is stretching out to fit the screen. And this is where your initial design consideration about the size of a graphic becomes really important. Because what you don't want to do is build all your graphics and then have to go and start messing around with the resolution of them to make them fit the screen. Okay, so this is the introduction lab. We're going to do several more to get used to this idea of dragging a component in and making a choice and understanding what that does. But right now, we're going to stop on this one.